It was my birthday, a day that should have been special, a day that should have been filled with love and joy. Instead, I sat on the couch, staring at the envelope in my hand. My husband, Jonathan, thought I would cry. He thought I would crumble the moment I read the divorce papers he had just handed me. But little did he know, this would be the day he would regret ever making that decision. Hey everyone, before we dive into the story, if you like revenge tales and moments where justice prevails, hit that like button and leave a comment below. And don't forget to check out more stories just like this one. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Claire, and I spent 26 years of my life married to Jonathan, a man who I once thought would be by my side forever. We were high school sweethearts, married right after college, and life seemed perfect for a while. But over time, the cracks started to show. Slowly but surely, I began to feel invisible in my own marriage. Jonathan became distant, selfish, and worst of all, he started to take me for granted. It wasn't long before he found someone else. Someone younger, someone more exciting. He had made up his mind. Divorce papers on my birthday, no less. But I wasn't going to let him have the last laugh. I thought about all the things he had put me through over the years. The late nights at work that really meant late nights with someone else. The lies, the cold shoulders, the years of me sacrificing everything for a man who didn't even appreciate me. The betrayal stung, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I was going to show him that I was stronger than he could ever imagine. I had a plan, a gift that he would never see coming. Jonathan handed me the envelope with that smug grin on his face, thinking I'd be too heartbroken to do anything. He expected tears. He expected me to beg him to stay. But that was not going to happen. I tore open the envelope, not even glancing at the contents. His face lit up with anticipation, as if he was about to witness the final breakdown of his wife. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye and I smiled. "I'll sign these," I said, my voice steady. "But not right now. I have something for you first." Jonathan looked confused. He wasn't used to me standing up for myself. He was used to me silently enduring. I stood up and walked over to the kitchen counter, where I had placed a small gift bag earlier that morning. His face twisted in curiosity. I could tell he was trying to figure out what I was up to. I handed him the gift bag without saying a word. He took it, still confused. When he opened it, his face dropped. Inside was a brand new leather wallet, pristine and sleek. He frowned, obviously expecting something more, something bigger, maybe even something emotional. "Open it," I said, gesturing to the wallet. He did, but his smile faded when he saw the contents. There, in the wallet, were hundreds of dollars, $5,000 worth of brand new bills, stacked neatly inside. His eyes flickered with surprise, but his confusion deepened. "You're probably wondering why I gave you this," I said calmly, watching his every reaction. "Well, here's the thing, Jonathan. You thought I would cry. You thought this divorce was going to destroy me. But what you don't know is that I've been preparing for this moment. For a long time." His face twisted in frustration. "What are you talking about, Claire?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I moved to the window and looked out at the world beyond. I had always been the kind of woman to keep my emotions in check, always playing the role of the dutiful wife. But now I was done with that. "I've been saving up," I continued, turning back to him. "I've been saving up for a new life. And now, thanks to you, I'm finally going to live it. I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I've been making plans, Jonathan. Plans that you know nothing about." His expression was unreadable now, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. He wasn't as confident as he had been moments before. I had his attention, and I wasn't about to give it back to him so easily. "What are you going to do?" he asked, voice shaking. "I'm going to take this money, and I'm going to do something you would never expect," I said, my words heavy with meaning. "But first, I'm going to sign those divorce papers you've been waiting for. And when I do, you'll know exactly what you've lost." Jonathan looked at me as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I could see the gears turning in his mind, trying to figure out how he could regain control. But it was too late for that. As I reached for the papers, I felt a wave of satisfaction. The power had shifted. The tables had turned. He thought he had won, but I was about to show him how wrong he was. I picked up the pen, and with one swift motion, I signed the papers. "Happy birthday to me," I muttered under my breath, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. Jonathan's face was a mix of disbelief and anger now. He stared at the signed papers in my hand, unable to process what had just happened. But the best part was yet to come. I had a plan for Jonathan, one that would make him regret everything, and he had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of calm. I had done it. I had finally taken control of my life. Jonathan was still in the house, pacing around, angry and confused. But I couldn't care less. His tantrums no longer fazed me. I had lived in his shadow for far too long, and now it was my turn to shine. When I entered the kitchen, I found him sitting at the table, his face buried in his hands. He had spent the entire night brooding over what had happened. He was still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that I wasn't devastated. The man was so used to seeing me as weak and submissive that he couldn't believe I was strong enough to walk away from him. "Are you really going through with this, Claire?" Jonathan asked, his voice low and strained. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee and took my time, enjoying the silence between us. The tension in the room was palpable. He was waiting for me to crumble, waiting for me to beg him to take me back. But that wasn't going to happen. "I've been through enough, Jonathan," I finally said, my voice steady but firm. "I've given you everything I had, and you threw it away. Now, it's my turn to take back what's mine." Jonathan looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk away from everything we built? You think I'm just going to let you take everything without a fight?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Everything we built? You mean everything you built while I was stuck at home, taking care of everything for you? You think you can scare me with your threats? You're the one who pushed me to this point. You're the one who destroyed what we had." I saw a flicker of guilt cross his face, but it quickly disappeared. He was too proud to admit he had been wrong. Instead, he tried to play it off as if this was all just a game. "I'll make sure you regret this, Claire," he said through clenched teeth. "You'll see." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Jonathan was like a child throwing a tantrum because he wasn't getting his way. He could say whatever he wanted, but I knew the truth. I had already won. The day passed slowly, with Jonathan sulking in the background while I focused on my plans. It felt so liberating to finally have my own space, to finally think for myself without worrying about what he thought. I had spent so many years living for him, for his approval, and it had gotten me nowhere. Now I was going to live for myself. That afternoon, I took a drive to a small town about an hour away. It was quiet, peaceful, and most importantly, it was far from the life I had lived with Jonathan. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to stay in the same house. I was going to leave it all behind. As I parked outside a little boutique, I felt a sense of excitement stir in my chest. This was the first step toward my new life. I walked inside, my heels clicking on the wooden floors, and I immediately felt a sense of peace. The shop was cozy, filled with beautiful vintage items, jewelry, and clothes. It was the kind of place I had always wanted to explore, but never had the time for. I spent the next hour browsing the shelves, picking out a few things I could use to start over. I was getting ready to build a new life, and I was going to do it on my terms. As I paid for my purchases, the shopkeeper gave me a warm smile. "New beginnings?" she asked, her eyes kind. I nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. "Yes," I said simply. "New beginnings." As I drove back home, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the horizon. It felt like a symbol of everything that was to come. I was on the verge of something great, something that would finally make me feel whole again. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw Jonathan standing outside, his arms crossed over his chest. He had been waiting for me, and I could tell from the look on his face that he wasn't finished with me yet. "Where were you?" he demanded as I stepped out of the car. "Out," I replied curtly, walking past him toward the front door. "Out," he echoed, his voice rising. "What? Are you just going to ignore me now? Like I don't even matter?" I turned to face him, my patience wearing thin. "You stopped mattering to me the moment you decided to tear apart our marriage. Don't pretend like this is about anything other than your ego." Jonathan took a step forward, his anger obvious now. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, let me tell you something, Claire. You won't get far without me. I'll make sure of it." I could feel my blood boil, but I kept my cool. I wasn't going to let him push me around anymore. "You're wrong, Jonathan. I've already made plans. I'm already moving on, and I don't need you for anything anymore." The word stung him, and for a moment I saw the tiniest crack in his armor. But just as quickly he snapped back into his defensive mode, his jaw clenched tight. "You won't get away with this," he spat. "I'll make sure you regret ever thinking you could do better." I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. "You'll see, Jonathan. I've already moved on, and when I do, you'll regret everything." With that, I turned and walked into the house, leaving him standing there, stewing in his anger. But I knew one thing for sure. I was ready for whatever he had planned next. The days passed, and Jonathan's mood grew darker with each one. He was angry, bitter, and determined to make me feel the consequences of my decision. But I had prepared myself for this. I knew what was coming, and I wasn't going back down. Jonathan wasn't the type to let things go easily. He was used to having control, used to getting what he wanted, and he wasn't about to let me walk away without a fight. I spent my days getting things in order. I hired a lawyer, started looking for a new place to live, and made plans to start a business of my own. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose. I was doing something for me, not for anyone else. It felt incredible. Meanwhile, Jonathan's attempts to get under my skin became more aggressive. He started showing up at the house uninvited, demanding to know what I was doing with my life. Every time, I shut him down, refusing to let him control my emotions. But his presence was still a constant reminder of everything I had left behind. One morning, as I was getting ready to leave for a meeting with my lawyer, I received an unexpected call. It was from the bank. They informed me that Jonathan had withdrawn a large sum of money from our joint account. $15,000. My stomach churned. He knew how important that money was for me to start over. I couldn't believe it. I called Jonathan immediately, my voice shaking with anger. "What the hell did you do, Jonathan?" I demanded when he answered. "Relax, Claire," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's my money too, you know. Just thought I'd take a little for myself." I was livid. "You don't get to do that. You have no right to touch our savings after what you've done. I'm not playing these games with you." "Oh, I think you are," he replied, his tone darkening. "You'll see. You'll regret walking away from me." I hung up, trying to steady my breath. This was the moment I had been waiting for. He had crossed the line, and now it was time to make him regret ever thinking he could take everything from me. I wasn't going to let him have the last word. The next day, I called the bank and had the transaction reversed. It wasn't easy, but I had enough evidence to prove that Jonathan had taken the money without my consent. The bank agreed to help me, and by the end of the day, the $15,000 was back in my account. It felt like a small victory, but it was one that meant the world to me. Jonathan wasn't happy when he found out. He came over later that evening, his face red with fury. "What did you do?" he shouted as soon as I opened the door. "I did what I had to do," I said calmly. "You don't get to steal from me, Jonathan. You don't get to control me anymore." He stormed into the living room, throwing his hands up in frustration. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you can just walk away from everything I built and take what's mine." "I'm not taking anything from you," I said, my voice steady. "You took it from me first. This is just me getting what I'm entitled to. Jonathan glared at me, his fists clenched by his sides. You won't get away with this, Claire. I'll make sure you regret this. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed by his threats. You're already regretting it, Jonathan. You just don't know it yet. The tension in the room was thick, the air between us charged with anger and resentment. I knew Jonathan wouldn't give up easily, but I also knew that I was ready for whatever he threw at me next. What Jonathan didn't realize was that he had just made a big mistake. He had played his hand too soon, and now I was going to play mine. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the years I had spent being ignored, belittled, and mistreated by Jonathan, and I thought about the revenge I was going to take. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up early and made a few phone calls. I needed to get a few things in place before I could make my move. It was time to teach Jonathan a lesson he would never forget. Later that day, I met with my lawyer and began to work on a strategy to protect myself financially. I didn't just want the house, the car, or the savings. I wanted something more. I wanted him to feel the consequences of his actions, to understand what it felt like to lose everything. I left the lawyer's office feeling empowered. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of Jonathan. I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't going to stop until I had everything I deserved. But as I drove home, my phone rang. It was a message from Jonathan. Come home. We need to talk. I knew what this meant. It meant he was going to try to make me feel guilty, try to manipulate me back into his arms. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I wasn't going to let him control me again. I deleted the message and kept driving. When I arrived back at the house, Jonathan was already there, waiting for me in the driveway. He looked determined, his face hard with anger. You really think you can just walk away from me, don't you? He spat as I got out of the car. I'm not walking away from you, Jonathan, I said, my voice steady. I'm walking away from everything you've put me through, and I'm never coming back. His eyes narrowed as he took a step closer to me. You'll regret this, Claire. You'll see. You won't get far without me. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had already made my decision, and nothing he said could change it. I turned and walked inside, leaving Jonathan standing there, stewing in his anger. He thought he had control, but he was about to learn just how wrong he was. It had been a few days since my confrontation with Jonathan, and while he continued to stir up trouble, I was no longer afraid. I had taken control of my life, and nothing he did could take that away from me. But I knew that he was just getting started. Jonathan was a man who always needed to be in control, and he wasn't going to let me go so easily. I had made my peace with that, but I was ready for whatever he had planned next. I had spent the last few days organizing my new life. I found a small apartment in a quiet part of town, far away from the memories of my marriage. I hired a moving company to take care of everything, and by the time I was done, I felt like a new person. It was like shedding an old skin, one that had weighed me down for so long. For the first time in years, I felt free. But Jonathan wasn't done yet. It was a Friday afternoon when I received the email. At first, I thought it was spam, but then I saw the sender's name, Jonathan. My stomach dropped as I opened it. It was a court order. Jonathan had filed for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming that I was harassing him and threatening his safety. My hands trembled as I read the words. I couldn't believe it. This was his move. He was trying to manipulate the legal system to gain the upper hand. I immediately called my lawyer, my mind racing. What should I do? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Stay calm, my lawyer replied. This is just his way of trying to get control. We'll fight this. But even as I spoke to my lawyer, I knew I had to take action. Jonathan was desperate, and I had no intention of letting him win. He thought he could make me afraid, make me back down. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. The next morning, I went to the courthouse with my lawyer to file a counterclaim. It was the final step in severing my ties with Jonathan. He had no idea what was coming, but I was ready. The process was slow and tedious, but I kept my eyes on the prize. I was finally going to get what I deserved. And I wasn't going to let Jonathan's petty games stop me. Later that afternoon, I received a call from the moving company. They had finished packing up all my things, and they were ready to deliver everything to my new apartment. I couldn't help but smile. I was finally leaving. I was finally going to start fresh, free from the man who had tormented me for so long. As I arrived at my new apartment, I felt a rush of excitement. The space was small but cozy, and it was mine. No more pretending. No more living for someone else. This was my life now, and I was going to make the most of it. But as I unlocked the door to my new home, I saw a figure standing in the hallway. Jonathan. My heart stopped. How had he found me? "Claire," he said, his voice dripping with anger. "You think you can just run away from me, don't you?" I took a deep breath, refusing to show fear. "What do you want, Jonathan?" I asked, my voice steady. He stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You think you're going to get away with this? You think you're going to walk out on me without facing the consequences? You're nothing without me. I made you, and I'll destroy you if it's the last thing I do." His words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had heard it all before. Jonathan always tried to make me feel small, to make me doubt myself. But not anymore. I wasn't the same woman who had stood by his side all those years. I was stronger now, and I was ready to fight back. "I'm done with you, Jonathan," I said, my voice cold. "You can't control me anymore, and you sure as hell can't intimidate me." His face twisted with fury, and for a moment I thought he might lash out. But instead he seemed to take a step back, his expression changing. "You really think you're better than me, don't you?" he asked, his tone softer now, almost pleading. "You think you can just walk away and leave me behind like I'm nothing?" I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. The truth was, I had already left him behind in every way that mattered. My heart was no longer his to control. I had found my strength, and nothing he could say or do would take that away from me. Jonathan stood there for a few moments, staring at me with a mix of anger and disbelief. But then, with a final look of frustration, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the hallway. I closed the door behind him, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. This was it, the end of an era. I was free, but just as I was about to turn around, I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be Jonathan again? I opened the door cautiously, only to find a man standing there with a large bouquet of flowers. He was holding a letter, and as he handed it to me, he said, "Delivery for Claire." I looked at the flowers, confused. Who would be sending me flowers now? I took the letter and opened it. It was a letter from Jonathan. I read it slowly, my stomach sinking with every word. "I've made my decision. You won't be able to escape what's coming for you, Claire. You've made a powerful enemy, and I'll make sure you pay for this. Just remember, you brought this on yourself." The letter sent a chill down my spine. Jonathan was done pretending. He was going to come after me in ways I wasn't prepared for. But that was fine. I had a plan too. And this time, it wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about taking back everything he had ever tried to take from me. And I was going to do it no matter what it took. The weeks that followed felt like a constant storm. Jonathan was relentless, trying every trick in the book to make me feel the weight of my decision. He had threatened me with lawsuits, tried to get the courts involved, and even went as far as spreading rumors about me in our social circles. It was like he was trying to destroy everything I had worked so hard for. But with each new move he made, I felt more and more certain that I was on the right path. I was no longer the woman who had stood by and accepted his abuse and manipulation. I had grown stronger, and I was no longer afraid. I had a life to build, and nothing, especially not Jonathan, was going to stop me from doing that. Despite Jonathan's attempts to ruin my reputation, I kept moving forward. I had started my own business, something I had always dreamed of but had never had the courage to pursue. I poured my energy into it, making it successful bit by bit. My days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and new projects. I was thriving. But even as I built my future, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jonathan was lurking in the background, waiting for the right moment to strike. One afternoon, as I was working late in my new office, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it, but something told me it was important. The message read, "I know where you are." My heart skipped a beat. The message was short, simple, and chilling, but the worst part was the picture attached to it. It was a photo of me, taken through a window. It had been taken from the street, outside my new apartment. I felt a rush of fear, but I pushed it down quickly. Jonathan was clearly trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me scared. I immediately called the police, reporting the stalking incident. The officers assured me that they would investigate, but deep down, I knew Jonathan wasn't going to back off easily. He wasn't going to let me go without making me suffer. The next few days were filled with tension. I tried to continue with my life, but it was hard not to feel like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. Jonathan had made it clear that he wasn't finished with me yet. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a letter. This time, it wasn't from Jonathan. It was from his lawyer. The letter stated that Jonathan was suing for full custody of our dog, a golden retriever named Max. He claimed that I had abandoned him and that he was the better pet parent. It was absurd, but I knew it was just another tactic to get under my skin. I couldn't help but laugh when I read it. Jonathan wasn't after Max. He was trying to control me, to drag me back into his life in any way he could. He knew how much I loved that dog, and he was using that love against me. But I wasn't going to let him win. I went to court with my lawyer to fight the custody battle over Max. The hearing was long and drawn out, but it was clear that Jonathan's case was weak. I had always been the one to care for Max, taking him to the vet, walking him, feeding him. Jonathan had barely spent any time with him, and the court saw through his attempts to manipulate the situation. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Max was coming home with me. It felt like a victory, but I knew this was just a small battle in the larger war. Jonathan wasn't going to stop, and I couldn't afford to let my guard down. A few days later, I received a call from my lawyer. Jonathan had filed another lawsuit, this time claiming that I had stolen money from our joint account before the divorce was finalized. It was another baseless accusation, but it was enough to send me into a state of frustration. I had enough. I was tired of being dragged through courtrooms, tired of Jonathan trying to tear me down at every turn. It was time to take control once and for all. I had a plan, a big one. I didn't just want Jonathan to back off. I wanted him to feel the consequences of his actions. I wanted him to understand just how wrong he had been. He thought he could ruin me, but he didn't realize that I had already built something stronger than he could ever take from me. The next day, I went to the bank. I withdrew every last cent from our joint account, all of the money that Jonathan had tried to take from me in the past. I transferred it to an account in my name alone, one that Jonathan couldn't touch. It wasn't just about the money. It was about showing him that I wasn't afraid anymore, that he had no hold on me. When Jonathan found out, he was furious. He showed up at my apartment, banging on the door, screaming my name. He threatened to take me to court again, to make my life miserable, but I was ready for him. I opened the door, standing tall, Max by my side. Jonathan looked at me, his face red with anger, and I could see the familiar sense of control slipping away from him. "You're making a mistake, Claire," he spat. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My actions had already spoken louder than any words I could say. Jonathan was losing. Slowly but surely, everything he had tried to take from me was slipping through his fingers. "Goodbye, Jonathan," I said, my voice calm and firm. "You don't control me anymore." I closed the door in his face, finally feeling the weight of everything I had endured start to lift. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. Jonathan had tried everything: manipulation, threats, lawsuits, and in the end he had nothing. He couldn't touch me. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I felt like I was on the winning side. Jonathan had made a lot of mistakes, and now he was going to have to live with them. It had been a week since I last saw Jonathan, and while I had finally started to feel some peace, the lingering tension from everything he had done still weighed heavily on my mind. I had moved on, but I was always aware that Jonathan wasn't the type to let things go easily. He was angry, and when people like Jonathan got angry, they did dangerous things. But the weeks turned into months, and to my surprise, Jonathan didn't show up at my door again. He didn't call. He didn't send any more letters. At first, I was cautious, waiting for the next shoe to drop, but eventually I allowed myself to relax, to enjoy my new life. Max was thriving in our new home, and my business had continued to grow. I had finally found my rhythm, and with each passing day, I realized just how much I had been held back by Jonathan. I had been so focused on surviving with him, I had forgotten how to live for myself. One evening, as I was closing up shop, I got a phone call from an unfamiliar number. My heart sank for a moment, but I answered anyway, steeling myself for whatever Jonathan was about to throw at me. To my surprise, it wasn't Jonathan on the other end. "Hello, Claire," a calm voice said. "This is Detective Stevens. I'm calling about an investigation regarding your ex-husband, Jonathan." My mind raced. What was this about? Was it some final attempt by Jonathan to drag me back into his mess? I couldn't let myself get pulled into another one of his schemes. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jonathan's been arrested," the detective continued. "He's facing multiple charges: fraud, harassment, and embezzlement. We have evidence that he's been involved in some illegal activities, and we need you to come down to the station for questioning." I froze. Jonathan? Arrested? The man I had once called my husband was involved in criminal activity? The detective must have sensed my shock. "I know this is a lot to process, but we believe you may have information that could help our investigation. Do you have time to meet with us?" I agreed, my mind still reeling from the news. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure. This was the final chapter in the nightmare Jonathan had created. It had always felt like he was trying to tear apart everything I built. But now the tables had turned. He was the one in trouble. When I arrived at the station, I was led into a small interview room. Detective Stevens was a tall, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We need your help to understand Jonathan's financial activities," she said, placing a folder on the table between us. "We have reason to believe he's been using your joint account and business connections to funnel money into illegal operations." I listened intently as she explained the details. Jonathan had used his position in our marriage to siphon money from various accounts, including mine, and had funneled it into shady investments and fraudulent schemes. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Jonathan hadn't just been a bad husband, he had been a criminal. "Do you have any idea what he was involved in?" Detective Stevens asked, looking at me for answers. I shook my head. I had no idea. All I knew was that he was always secretive about his finances. I never imagined it went this deep. The detective nodded. "We're going to need you to testify in court, Claire. Your testimony could be the key to locking him away for good." I sat there for a long moment, thinking. Jonathan had hurt me in so many ways, but I had never imagined it would come to this. I had thought his betrayal was bad enough, but now I was realizing the extent of the damage he had caused. It was beyond personal, it was criminal. "I'll do it," I said finally. "I'll testify." It felt like the right thing to do, the only thing to do. Jonathan had tried to destroy me in every way possible. He had tried to break me, and in doing so he had left a trail of destruction. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not anymore. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Jonathan was officially charged with multiple crimes, and the trial was set to begin. I was subpoenaed as a key witness, and I prepared myself for the difficult task ahead. But as the day of the trial approached, I began to feel a sense of closure that I hadn't realized I needed. This was the final step in freeing myself from Jonathan's grasp. This was the moment I had been waiting for. On the day of the trial, I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest. Jonathan sat across from me, his face stone cold, but I could see the anger burning in his eyes. He had tried to make me feel small, but now I was the one who held the power. He couldn't hurt me anymore. When it was my turn to take the stand, I looked at Jonathan one last time before I spoke. The man who had tried to destroy me was now powerless. His lies, his manipulation, his schemes, they were all exposed. I told the court everything. I told them about the lies he had told, about how he had stolen from me, and how he had tried to ruin my life. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about making sure Jonathan could never hurt anyone again. The verdict came down quickly. Jonathan was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to a long prison term, his empire of lies finally crumbling around him. As the judge read the sentence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't just the end of my story with Jonathan. It was the end of his control over me. He had tried to break me, but in the end he had only broken himself. I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. I had won, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. Jonathan had tried to destroy me, but in the end he had given me the strength to rebuild my life from the ground up. And now nothing could stop me. I was finally free, and it felt incredible.